don't think I would ever describe myself as being someone who is easily terrified. Now, let me explain a little bit. I think we need to have an understanding of what it means to be scared versus what it means to be terrified, right? I view being scared as just a temporary thing. It's that moment when you turn around and all of a sudden you're face to face with a spider who's making his way down from the ceiling. It catches you off guard, but it's not going to ruin your whole day. Unless you're like really scared of spiders, that's your business, I guess. But being terrified is something else entirely. Being terrified is like being scared over a course of period of time. It's that time between getting the letter from the IRS and the actual audit taking place. You have something that is looming over you, something that's coming up that you're not sure how it's going to go. And so I don't consider myself to be somebody who gets overly terrified by much, probably because the greatest fear in the world is public speaking, and I do that a lot. Maybe that's the case. But it's also, I've kind of got this mindset in my brain that the worst thing that could happen in every possible situation is that I die, and then whatever it was I was supposed to be terrified of is no longer my problem to deal with. It's a wonderful perspective on life, isn't it? But I don't get terrified of too much. But of course, like everything else in life, there are exceptions to that particular rule. And probably the thing that terrifies me most in my life can be summed up into just 4 words. And chances are pretty good that you probably are scared of these 4 words yourself. But it's amazing how 4 little words can have such power over my life that I could be having the greatest day of all time, not a care in the world, and then those 4 words are said to me, and I am a scared child again. Again, I'm going to guess that they're the same 4 words that'll terrify you when you hear them or receive them in a text message, which I think is infinitely worse to get these 4 words. I don't know what it is about texting, but it's just immediately this is worse. But no matter how these 4 words are phrased to me, I'll go from being my happy-go-lucky self to being an anxious man. And those 4 words are, we need to talk. It's okay. You're safe. Everything's fine. Right? I mean, the instant that those 4 words will cross my phone screen or be uttered by somebody in my presence, immediately my brain goes into overdrive, right? I am thinking through the list of what these possible, why doesn't anybody ever follow up those words? We need to talk about. Add 1 word and I'm going to be fine, right? But nobody ever does that. They don't tell you what the subject is going to be. They just say, we need to talk. And then you're left to go, gulp. Right? I start scrolling through my brain about what could possibly be the topic of conversation that is so important that we need to talk about it face to face, but you can't tell me what we're going to talk about right now. Right? And none of the things that I ever come up with in my brain are overly positive. Right? I'm always thinking through what is the worst case scenario about what this individual needs to talk to me about that they can't just say, we need to talk about your favorite pizza recipe or something like that. Nobody ever does that. Please start doing that. But probably the worst offender in my life, the one who is instantaneously going to throw me into a state of utter and sheer terror, is my mom. I'm 2 weeks away from turning 40. And I am a solid 1.5 feet taller than my mother. And yet, when I get those words in a text message from my mom, I am instantly transported from a nearly 40-year-old back into a 6-year-old little boy scared about what his mom is going to do for punishment, right? I start thinking through about what are all the things that mom wants to talk to me about. Maybe she found out about the precious moment that I thought I glued back together well enough. Maybe she found out what Blake and I buried in the backyard and then vowed to never speak of again. Maybe she knows where I really was that one night in 2003. It doesn't matter that I haven't lived under her roof in nearly 20 years. It doesn't matter that I'm almost 40 with a family of my own. It doesn't matter that I don't even live in the same state as her. Once my mom says, we need to talk, I am instantly scared. Right? At this point, she knows how much this bothers me. She knows that this just, I like to use the phrase, irks my taters. You're welcome. She knows that that's going to instantaneously make my day ruined, but she still does it all anyway. And at this point, I'm convinced she does it simply because she likes to mess with me, right? As a parent, I kind of get it. It's fun to mess with our kids. But as the one who's on the receiving end, I hate it. But here's the thing, and this is true not just of my mom, but nearly every person else who ever tells me we need to talk. Once we inevitably have that conversation, it's never as bad as I thought it was going to be. In fact, a lot of times it winds up being, if not a pleasant conversation, at least a productive conversation, because we can sort through whatever is going on around us. Everything that I had to come up with that I was afraid about what it might be is never as bad as what it actually winds up being. And I find myself every time afterwards thinking the exact same thing. This is what I was so scared of? But I let my mind go. I let myself wander into the darkest corners of it and think of every negative thing I could possibly think of, only to find out it wasn't as big a deal as I made it out to be. I think there's just some part of our brains that is wired to expect the worst possible outcome in any situation that we don't know how things will end. Right? There's a part of our brains that's just set to default, everything is terrible, right? As soon as something is moderately inconvenient for us, we start thinking that this is the worst possible thing that could happen. And so we kind of go through all those negative thoughts and those negative feelings. We don't know how the conversation's going to go. We don't know how things are going to play out in the situation. We don't know what's waiting for us on the other side of it. And so we just try to prepare ourselves for the worst possible scenario. We start thinking about what could be the worst possible outcome of this conversation. It all ties in because what it really is that we are afraid of the unknown. We don't like being in the dark because we don't know what's in there. We don't like hearing we need to talk because we don't know what the conversation is going to be about. We don't like knowing what's not there. I guess that's a terrible way to phrase that. We don't like not knowing what's there. There we go. Hey, I was up for sunrise service this morning, and I am not a morning person, so we're doing it. Anyway, but here's the thing. Sometimes, though, we might feel that fear because the relationship has some unresolved tension to it. And so we anticipate that things will get messy, maybe even ugly. And so I think that's why so much of Jacob's behavior is justified by the time we get to where we are in our text. Now, you might be sitting there, you might be wondering, what does Jacob have to do with Easter? And I'm going to tell you two things really quick. Number one, just hold on a minute, all right? And secondly, I did title this sermon Not What I Expected, and I'm kind of leaning into that this week. But we've been talking about Jacob in this church now for several weeks, and we've kind of seen Jacob have some less than ideal behavior, some less than ideal characteristics, and they're all kind of come to a head by the time we read our text today in Genesis 33. So if you want to turn to Genesis 33 in your Bibles, just put your thumb there, because we're going to get there eventually, but we got a lot of ground to cover, because I think even though we've talked about this over and over again, I really feel like we need to recap everything that led to this particular moment, because I promise you, it all plays a factor into this particular chapter of Jacob's life. Everything has kind of been building up to this particular moment for him. So as you may recall, Jacob himself is a twin. He has a twin brother, and their mother Rebekah, when she was pregnant with him, after struggling for years with infertility issues, her and her husband Isaac, as much as they tried, they could not conceive a child. And finally, as she gets pregnant, she is now suddenly expecting twins. And as somebody who was not expecting to have twins but had twins, that's a wild moment. I can remember sitting in the ultrasound room and the tech, I'm wondering, why is it reflecting on the screen? That's weird. And then Mandy firing off, is that two? And then the doc saying, congratulations, it's twins. And then I don't remember the next 6 hours. I remember my next clear, coherent thought being, I guess I'm buying a minivan. But But it's an unusual thing to expect twins. And for Rebekah, as she's going through this pregnancy, she's feeling that these two are just never at ease. They are constantly seeming to fight in her very womb. And she cries out to God, asking, why do I have to go through this? Right, Mandy? That's fun. And God responds to her in Genesis chapter 25, verse 23, saying, and the Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples from within you shall be divided. The one shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger. So right away, before they're ever even born, we are informed that these 2 brothers, while they may be twins, they are not going to get along. They are constantly going to be at odds with each other from even before the get-go. And I got to say, to be honest with you, I think that Rebekah and Isaac hold some responsibility for that. Because their parenting wasn't exactly ideal, as we find out in Genesis 25, verse 28. It says that they played favorites, that Isaac loved Esau because he ate of his game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. And everybody knows that parents who play favorites, they're just the best kind of parents, right? But as messed up as that might be, the truth is that Jacob himself is the one who ultimately ruins the relationship with his brother. We talked about this way back in week 1, but Esau, as being the first one to emerge from the womb, it gave him what is called the right of the birthright, right? If you're the firstborn son in this culture, in this time period, it means that you are entitled to at least 2/3 of your father's estate. There are some historical records that even indicate that in some cases, dad said, just give it to them. And so Esau, because he is the one to emerge from the womb first by mere seconds, he is entitled to 2/3 at least of Isaac's estate. Isaac himself was a very wealthy man. And not only is it the wealth that Isaac himself accumulated, he's also entitled to the wealth that their grandfather Abraham accumulated, both of which were incredibly wealthy men. And so when we talk about the birthright, we are talking what is essentially millions of dollars in today's money. And there's a part of Jacob that just always wants that, right? Especially because he's not entitled to it because of 3 seconds or whatever it was. It says in the text that as Esau emerged from the womb, Jacob is grabbing at his heel. So they're seconds away from each other, and because of those handful of seconds, Jacob does not get the birthright. And there's a part of him that just wants that, right? We're talking millions of dollars. I would want that. If somebody wants to give me millions of dollars, I'll be glad to take it off your hands. Jacob is doing everything that he can throughout his life to scheme and connive, which is all the stuff that you want your hero to do in a story, to try to get this birthright, to try to get all of this. And wouldn't you know it, one day Esau just decides to plop an opportunity right into Jacob's lap. Esau is out in the field one day and he is working really hard. He comes back home and he's not just hungry, he's farm boy hungry. And as a farm boy, believe me, there is a difference. And as he's coming into the house, Jacob is making a lentil stew, which is, just essentially like broth, some beans, a few root vegetables. Nothing about that excites me, but Esau is so hungry that just the aroma of this cooking is enough to overpower him. And he asks his brother, give me a bowl of this stew so that I can eat. I'm about to die. Because when you're farm boy hungry, you tend to get a little exaggerative. I can very clearly recall saying the same thing at a few lunch tables. But Esau is just dying for all of this, and so Jacob decides to use this as an opportunity, and he names the price for this bowl of stew. In Genesis 25:31, it says, Jacob said, sell me your birthright now. Here's the thing. In the heat of the moment, when the rational side of my brain has decided to check out, I have made some really poor choices. I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that you have made some pretty poor choices in the heat of the moment. But no matter how bad your choices are, Esau, brother, takes the cake. He is so hungry, so desperate for something to eat, that he is willing to walk away from millions of dollars for a bowl of bean stew. I don't know that there's an award for this. I've always said that I think Peter is the biggest bonehead in the Bible, but I think it's like Peter and then Esau's like right here because he makes that deal. And it's all said and done. And here's the thing. I think, honestly, if Jacob would have left things right there, if he'd have just said, hey, I've got the birthright, I'm good, that's enough, the relationship might be salvageable. It's going to be strained. It's going to be awkward. It's going to be kind of weird. It's going to be a little tense, especially once Dad dies and the birthright is given to Jacob. But I still think we can make it work. See, I say that because there's another element of being the firstborn that Esau had to look forward to. Right? When Isaac, his father, was going to near the end of his life, he was going to bestow upon Esau what is referred to as the blessing. Now, in this culture, in this context, the blessing from your father was a huge honor to receive. It was usually prophetic in nature, meaning that, while the birthright would provide wealth right now, oftentimes the blessing would include the promise of wealth yet to come. Right? So while you can get millions of dollars right now, in the blessing you can get millions of dollars later on. Right? Seems like a good deal to me. But also we need to keep in mind that Esau himself was very tight with his dad. Right? That verse was clear that their parents played favorites because they're an awesome mom and dad. And Dad was tightest with Esau. And so this blessing would mean that this is the last gift that the father who loves him could ever give his favorite son. And this time it wasn't just Jacob who wanted to have it. Because again, if mom and dad are playing favorites, well, mom's favorite, that's Jacob. And one day as Isaac is getting older, as his eyesight has begun to fail him to the point that he's practically blind, like Brad. Love you, buddy. He is nearing the end of his life. He calls Esau into his room and he says in Genesis chapter 27, verses 3 and 4, "Now then take your weapons, your quiver and your bow, and go out to the field and hunt game for me, and prepare for me delicious food such as I love. And bring it to me so that I may eat, that my soul may bless you before I die." Mom overheard this conversation. And Mom loves Jacob just a little bit more than she loves Esau. And so her and her favorite son, they scheme together. They come up with this plan where Jacob is going to go and he's going to grab 2 male goats and bring them back to Mom so that Mom can prepare him the way that Dad likes to eat. And Jacob, he's going to put on his brother's clothes. But more than that, Esau was an incredibly hairy guy. Jacob is called very fair-skinned. So we're going to take the skin of those goats and we're going to put them on your arms. We're going to try, in case Dad decides that he needs to feel to make sure that it's Esau, that you're going to pass. Yeah, good parenting. Their deception works. Understand, these two have successfully deceived a blind elderly man. Good job. And when Esau learns that his brother has taken the blessing, the last remaining most important thing that he could get from his father after he had sold off the other most important thing that he could get from his father, you can almost hear the desperation in Esau's voice as he asks his father in Genesis 27:36. It says, Esau said, Is he not rightly named Jacob? For he has cheated me these 2 times. He took away my birthright, and behold, now he has taken away my blessing. And then he said, have you not reserved a blessing for me? You can hear him pleading with his father. Dad, this can't be it. This can't be how this ends. He's realizing his brother has stolen everything that matters to him. Everything that could have been important to him, not just for right now, but for the rest of his life. And his brother has just robbed that from him. He has just taken away the last gift that Dad can give me. And so it's understandable that the last thing that we hear from Esau until today's text In Genesis 27, verse 41, it says, now Esau hated Jacob. You think? Because of the blessing with which his father had blessed him. And Esau said to himself, the days of mourning for my father are approaching, and then I will kill my brother Jacob. Understand, all of this is Jacob's doing, right? Jacob can't possibly blame anybody but himself for this decision making. He's the one who chose to take advantage of a weak moment from his brother. He's the one who chose to walk into that room and try to pass himself off as his brother. He is the one who has stolen everything from Esau. Esau's wrath is justified. It's understandable that he would want to see his brother dead, right? If somebody took millions of dollars from you as well as the promise of millions of dollars to come, you're probably going to be pretty upset at them, right? I get mad when somebody in my household takes the last donut. But if you're talking millions of dollars being stripped away from me right away, I got to feel that Esau's wrath and wanting to see his brother dead is justified. And what does Jacob do when he hears that his brother wants him dead? Well, he does what every person in this kind of situation would do. He runs away. He flees like a coward. And he is gone from his home for 20 years. 20 years of doing everything he can to stay away from his brother who just wants to see him dead. 20 years of not knowing how the situation is going to resolve itself. 20 years of not knowing how things are going to go. But after 20 years, he finally decides, like we talked about last time, it's time to go home. Now, I don't know if you've ever had a situation where you and a relative have had words exchanged with each other and haven't resolved it, but I can tell you from experience, it makes the Easter supper a little bit awkward. Right? And so Jacob kind of sends some messengers on ahead of himself to kind of see, to inform Esau, hey, Jacob is coming back, and then gauge what his reaction is. See how Esau feels about the fact that I'm coming home. And so when the messengers go and they come back, they give Jacob the news, and oh boy. It says in Genesis 32, verse 6, and the messengers returned to Jacob saying, we came to your brother Esau, and he is coming to meet you. And there are 400 men with him. Real quick, off to the side, I love the first part of verse 7 there because it says, then Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed. I'm pretty sure that that's Bible speak for Jacob needed to change his shorts. What do you do here, right? I mean, the guy who you just enraged, the last time you ever saw him, he was saying how much he wants to kill you as soon as dad is dead, is now on his way to come and meet you, and he's bringing 400 of his buds with him. None of this feels like it's a good situation, does it? Right? The first time you find yourself around somebody that you may have even a little bit slighted, there's that awkwardness, there's that tension. You don't have to deal with the fact that they're coming up with 400 other guys. What do? How do you try to solve this situation? How do you try to placate your brother to the point that maybe he won't kill you? Well, Jacob decides, I'm going to put a gift together for him. And we read about it in Genesis 32, 13 through 15. It says, so he stayed there that night. And from what he had with him, he took a present for his brother Esau. 200 female goats, 20 male goats, 200 ewes, 20 rams, 30 milking camels. What is a milking camel? Anyway, and their calves, 40 cows and 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys and 10 male donkeys. Understand, Jacob is doing everything that he can here to try to buy his brother's forgiveness. Right? We've talked about this before. Livestock in this particular time period is a symbol of your wealth, and he had just sent him a whole lot of livestock, hoping that maybe, just maybe, Esau will let me live. That he won't hurt me. He won't hurt my family. He won't wipe us off the face of the map. But that's not all. That's not all that Jacob does, because when we finally get to Genesis 33, Jacob does one last thing to try to placate his brother, but he also does it while he does something that's almost, and I say almost noble. Because even though he does something that feels like the right thing, he still does it in a slightly scummy way. In Genesis 33, verses 1 through 3, we read, "And Jacob lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, Esau was coming, and 400 men with him." Yikes. So he divided the children among Leah and Rachel and the two female servants. He put the servants with their children in front, Leah with her children, and then Rachel and Joseph last of all. He himself went on before them, bowing himself to the ground 7 times until he came near his brother. Everything is coming to a head. His brother is finally in eyesight after sending him all of those animals, including those milking cows or milking camels. We can't forget them. What does camel milk taste like? I just want to know. I don't want to taste it, but I want to know. Anyway, Jacob decides to go ahead and put his wives and his children behind him, which feels like such a noble thing to do. That he's going to make sure that even if Esau is going to attack him, he may kill me, but he's not going to. My family's at least going to have a chance to get out of here. They're going to have a chance to escape, and so my legacy can still live on. And while that feels noble, he still puts his favorite wife and his favorite son at the back, so that they have the best chance to get away. So while he does something noble, still a little bit scummy. Nice to know his character's consistent, isn't it? But don't miss the last part of verse 3 there. That's an important part. As his brother is coming, as they are in eyesight of each other, after Jacob has sent him these extravagant gifts, he goes even further. He goes one more step further. He bows. In every culture, it doesn't matter where you are in the world, the act of bowing in front of someone is, and always will be, an act of humility. It is recognizing that this person with whom I'm bowing in front of is more important, is more powerful, is better than me. But Jacob doesn't just bow once. He bows in front of his brother 7 times. I found myself wondering as I was putting this all together, like, his kids are behind him. At this point, he's still got 11 sons, and they're all watching Dad do something they've never seen him do before. I can very clearly remember the very first time I ever saw my father cry, because I didn't know Dad could do that. Right? And I'm guessing for these kids, as they're watching their father try to bow in a way to hopefully save himself and the entire family, what does that do to their opinion of Dad? How does that shift their perspective on who he is? But even though Jacob continues to bow in front of his brother and tries to do everything that he can to placate him and has sent him these extravagant gifts, Esau and those 400 dudes, they're still coming, man. And you can feel everything. The tension in this moment is completely palpable. Every nerve in Jacob's whole body is alive. His fight or flight is screaming, "Do something!" But he is paralyzed with fear. He is stuck there while his brother is now running towards him. What is Esau going to do? What is his wrath going to look like? How is he going to end my life? How is this all going to play out? What is going to happen? But Esau ran to meet him and embraced him and fell on his neck and kissed him. And they wept. That's not what I expected. That's nothing like I expected. And I'll guess that as surprised as we might be for this reaction, knowing all the ways that Jacob has stolen from his brother and messed up his brother's entire life, for him to get this greeting, I don't think Jacob expected it either. You can almost picture it, right? That moment or two as Esau wraps his brother up in the biggest bear hug that he possibly can. It takes Jacob a second to register, he's not killing me. He's hugging me. And when he goes to return that hug and recognizes, this is not how I thought this was going to go, the two of them, full-grown man, and Esau is described to us as a very strong, very burly, very hairy man, burst into tears. Both of them weeping, because after 20 years, Esau has his brother back. The gifts didn't matter. Esau, even, a little further down in the text, Esau even goes so far as to say, I don't need this. They didn't placate anything. Jacob didn't need to bow. You don't bow to your brother. All Esau wanted was my brother back. And after 20 years, he's finally got it. They can sort through all the awkwardness of how they left things. They can work all that out later. But for now, let's just be happy because I got my baby bro back. It's not how Jacob expected things to go. But my goodness, is it a beautiful picture of how things go. He just wanted to celebrate that the brother he loved in spite of everything is finally home. I think that a lot of people are genuinely afraid of God. I think a lot of people feel like God is looking for an opportunity to hurt them in some way. That all God wants to do is punish them, hurt them, smite them, whatever smiting means, and in just some way, shape, or form, take some sort of vengeance on them. We have this view of God of being a God of wrath and a God of vengeance and a God who just almost seems to long to bring pain to people. And so we play this little game. We play this little game where we try to do everything that we can to try to placate God, to try to win God's favor. We think if we do just enough good things, if I stop doing that, or if I pull back on doing that, or maybe if I start doing this thing over here, then God will accept me, then God will love me, then God won't hurt me. We're like Jacob, trying to send gifts in the hopes that God won't be mad at us. Or we're like Jacob trying to bow down 7 times in the hope that God won't wipe us out. But Easter paints a much different picture of God. It paints a much different picture of how God views us. It proves that God loves us so much that in spite of all of the ways that we have let him down, in spite of all of the things that we have done that go against him and his nature, in spite of all of that, he just longs to embrace us. So much so that he ran towards us, putting flesh on himself, and he welcomed us back with outstretched arms. As Jesus died on the cross, he cleared the path for us to return to God. And his resurrection proves to us that we are given a promise for hope. That though our physical bodies may die, that ain't the end of it. That instead we get to live eternally in the light of his love. There's nothing that we can do to try to win over his favor. No X number of right things or no amount of money given to a charity is ever going to do what God's already done for you. We don't have to try to buy that sort of stuff. We don't even have to try to give up the things that we know we ought to give up. God's going to sort out all that awkwardness with us later, and he's still working on me. I got a feeling that for every other follower in this room, he's probably still working on a few things with you. He just wants to embrace us. He just wants to welcome us back home. Maybe you've carried that first image of God, the God of wrath, the God of vengeance. Maybe you've carried it for so long that it was downright difficult for you to come in here today. Maybe you were worried that as soon as you crossed the door, that's it. God's going to smite you. Maybe you're only sitting here because mom or dad or a spouse or grandma or grandpa or somebody just told you that the only thing they wanted this Easter was just to sit with you in church. But you've carried around this idea that if you just stop drinking, if you just stop smoking, if you just stop doing this or that, or if you just start doing this or that, that maybe you'll be acceptable to God then. I don't know who told you that lie. Real quick, church, I think we know exactly why they think that. Because you and I have not done a great job of presenting who God really is. But there's nothing that we can do to make ourselves acceptable to God. He already accepts us. He already loves us. He just longs to throw his arms around you to welcome you home. That's the picture of what Easter is all about, because that's who God is. Do you got things you got to figure out with him? Sure, all of us do. But you don't have to check off some sort of imaginary list of prerequisites to be able to be accepted by God. Easter shows that God runs to embrace us and to welcome us home. And that offer is extended for you today. Paul would write in Romans chapter 8, verses 1 through 4, and we'll close with it this morning. He said, "There is therefore now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. For the law of the Spirit of life has set you free in Christ Jesus from the law of the sin and death. For God has done what the law, weakened by the flesh, could not do, by sending his own Son in the likeness of sinful flesh, and for sin he condemned sin in the flesh, in order that the righteous requirement of the law might be fulfilled in us, who walk not according to the flesh, but according to the Spirit."